Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Andrew Musgrave here, and I'm joined by one of our football editors, Matt Ketchell. You may have seen yesterday on our website, we revealed the results to the big manager survey where we asked you guys to tell us who you wanted to replace Steve Bruce. Now, more than 25,000 of you guys filled in that survey, and the results were kind of as expected, I think. What I'll do, I'll get up this little image to show you just how the results went, and then we'll talk through them and we'll get both our opinions on how this managerial search is going. But first of all, Ketch, we'll just talk through these results. So as I said, more than 25,000 people left their opinion, and you can see there that Paulo Fonseca was top. That's the ex-Roma boss who's been tipped over the last couple of weeks. He's fallen away in the bookies odds of late over the past few days. But of course, that doesn't really mean much. We then have Antonio Conte, who's of course been heavily linked to the Manchester United job, is said not to want to start a new job outside of like pre-season. He likes to start before the season begins. Eddie Howe, Roberto Martinez, of course, knows Graham Jones very well on 10% there, and Steven Gerrard as well, who I think is the pick of many, but he shut down suggestions in his last press comments that he would leave. I think he told the reporter not to ask a daft question, to put it politely. What did you make of the results? I mean, we'll get into the other section in a minute because there's some interesting names there, but in general, are these the names that you expected to crop up?
I would think so, yeah. I mean, this poll was put up in the immediate wake of Steve Bruce leaving last week. So the initial shortlist, it didn't have names like Rafa, Mourinho, other names banded around with Diego Simeone. So those names have kind of come into the picture a bit later, probably based on their poor results with their clubs, suggesting that they might become available. But it was a pretty robust shortlist, and there was the option for fans to write suggest other names who maybe weren't on our shortlist. But it's a really, really great sample size. Over 25,000, I think, is a pretty true reflection of where fans' heads are at the minute. Fonseca's name has been the most heavily linked over the last 10 days or so. And he seems to be at the top of, I would say, the mid-level of manager that are in the shortlist. So obviously Antonio Conte is one of the best managers in the world. Is he going to come to Newcastle United at this time? Probably not. But there is that mid-range of manager who probably are interested in this project. Fonseca is in there. Eddie Howe, I would have thought, is interested. Has been out of work quite a lot. Also, Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard might want to come back into the Premier League and have a go with a nice heavy transfer kitty. So yeah, it was those are the names that were linked. Other names on the shortlist were Lucien Favre, Graham Potter, Wayne Rooney, who was linked early on, but it's gone quiet again. So there was about a dozen names in there with the option to put other, and Fonseca was clearly the favourite among fans.
Now, you mentioned there the other category, and I have added them up. So Kevin Keegan was in there, he got 106 mentions. Benitez was in there, he got 123. And Mourinho, math services correctly, got about 108. So that there were the names. I mean, so Benitez obviously tops that with that category.
Mm.
And given the result against Watford, and there was some reports that the new owners would try and tempt him, but I can't see him walking away from Everton. Obviously, I think had this happened a few months ago, obviously he would have been probably straight through the door and in charge. I mean, just how important is it that they get this decision right? Because we expected it to happen a lot faster. I think a lot of people expected Steve Bruce to leave a lot quicker than he did. And obviously now he's been gone. Graham Jones is in charge with Chelsea. That's what he said in his last press conference. We'll see what happens after that. It is taking a little bit of time, but it's important to take the time in a way because this is such a big decision, especially given where Newcastle are in the Premier League table.
Yeah, well, I wrote yesterday when I presented the results on the Chronicle Live's website that this is probably the biggest decision in the club's modern history. Such a crossroads, really. And it feels like Bruce has been gone a while already. Time's really rolling on. And I know Graham Jones basically intimated in his press conference on Friday that he'd have charge of the team for Crystal Palace and for Chelsea. That suggests that the game after that, he won't be in charge. So perhaps we'll have a decision middle of next week or the start of next week, but I think it needs to come sooner rather than later because there is a bit of limbo there, and the club clearly needs a bit more direction. So, but the Bruce news came out so the Bruce sacking, the Bruce termination news came out so quickly. We could have a decision today. Things happen quickly in football. It could happen today. It could happen before the weekend. The new manager could be in the stand. for the Chelsea game, and then in the training ground first thing on Monday morning. So we don't know, but I would like to think that it'll be early next week because there's no time to waste really. The club is 19th in the league, and the players need a bit of direction.
I mean, out of those names that have been mentioned, or even some of the names that aren't on that final list, in your opinion, who would you like to see?
Well, Fonseca, I think, is the top level of the mid range. So I think he's the best manager they could realistically get. Like I said at the start of the stream, we didn't have Benitez and Mourinho's name in the fold the day that Steve Bruce was sacked because they were comfortably in their new positions at Roma and Everton, respectively. Like I said, football changes things quickly. They've had a couple of bad results and look a bit wobbly at their clubs. Were they to lose their jobs, I'm sure there would be conversations to have, and maybe the club are playing that waiting game, seeing if there is a wobble there. Will Rafa or Mourinho leave their positions? Probably not, but you never know. They have had two particularly bad results each, Mourinho in particular. So maybe there's a bit of hanging on there. The famous ITK journalist Fabrizio Romano yesterday on a podcast said that Fonseca is happy with things and is ready to accept. Newcastle just need to green light it. That was reported on chroniclelive.co.uk yesterday. So it seems like they've spoken to Fonseca. He's happy with the terms, and now Newcastle are sort of starting to play the field a little bit. Ten Hag's name came into it, the Ajax manager, which I think is ambitious, but he was asked about it, and he's quite clearly distanced himself. But his name was heavily linked because of the links with Mark Overmars potentially being mooted as coming in as sporting director. I think he's a little bit out of reach, if I'm being honest, with Newcastle. So I would say Fonseca is the best of the realistic targets. Conte isn't going to come, I don't think. He is the manager who takes you, when you're a Tottenham or a Chelsea who are just in the Champions League and you want to go that next level and go to win titles and win Champions Leagues. I think that's where Conte comes in, and the Manchester United situation is probably piquing his interest, so he's probably got his eye on that. So Conte, I don't think will happen. Eddie Howe went down with Bournemouth, so there's probably a bit of reservation there from the Newcastle owners. And then the interesting one for me is with Roberto Martinez. Now, he would fit really nicely because of the link with Graham Jones. Graham Jones has been Roberto Martinez's assistant for the majority of his managerial career. I don't know how much of an appetite the Newcastle owners have to pull a manager out of an existing role. There would be compensation to pay to the Belgium FA if Roberto Martinez were to come in, but the integration with the squad would be a lot more seamless because of the relationship Roberto Martinez already has with Graham Jones. And then after that, I think Gerrard and Lampard come into it. Gerrard hasn't distanced himself as much or as hard as say someone like Ten Hag did. He's been a lot more measured with his response. He has been asked a question in his Rangers press conferences and post-match interviews. Maybe he's interested. He's won the league with Rangers and maybe proved all he wants to do up there. They're doing well in Europe. He might be interested, and I'm sure Frank Lampard would love another tilt at the Premier League, but I don't know how interested Newcastle fans are in having Frank Lampard in charge. Only 4% of fans voted for him to take over. 10% voted for Steven Gerrard. So for me, I do like the look of Fonseca. I wrote an article last week on chroniclelive.co.uk about how he turned Facundo Ferreira into a 20-30 goal striker in Ukraine at Shakhtar. And obviously, famous Newcastle United flop came and had a season-long loan at Newcastle under Alan Pardew. Never played in the first team. Then Fonseca basically revitalised his career, and he was playing and scoring in the Champions League. So Fonseca looks like someone who can take poorly performing players and turn them and help them reach their potential. Likes to play attacking football, which Newcastle fans appreciated. So as right now, the way the managerial market is, I'd probably go with Fonseca. What about yourself, Andrew?
Well, I was a big fan of Potter at Brighton, but I don't think they'll go and pay the compensation that's there. Like you said, Martinez, or they're going to pay to get him out of his contract. Fonseca, I don't know a lot about him. I've seen a few people say defensively he's not the best. And we all know that Newcastle United's defence at the moment is just leaking goals like there's no tomorrow. I mean, what's 20 goals conceded already against Palace? And we'll talk a little bit about Palace later in the show. They were just lucky Benteke just couldn't find the back of the net enough times because obviously he had one ruled out. He scored. He should have scored another 2 or 3. they were opened up by a Palace side, which haven't really scored that many goals this season. And you do fear what's going to happen on Saturday against Chelsea after Chelsea thumped Norwich. What was it, 7-0? And they didn't even have the best players. I mean, Lukaku was out and Werner as well. So you do worry about that defence, and I think it does need someone to come in who can just steady the ship at the back, because we know if Newcastle get forward, they've got someone in Callum Wilson who can score goals. They've got St. Maximin on his day, who's just unplayable at times. But again, I don't know too much about Fonseca. Potter would be my number one choice, but again, I don't think they'll go for that. Steven Gerrard is an interesting one. He knows quite a few people advisory around Newcastle, but again, there'll be the compensation issue. I mean, we've got someone here, Michael Davison, just says, explain to me why Fonseca would be the best choice. So do you want to just expand, in your view, Ketch, why you would potentially like to see him come into the dugout?
Well, one of the things about Fonseca is he puts a big emphasis on fitness, but his fitness methods are that he likes to, everything is done with the ball. And one thing I noticed at the last Newcastle game, I was at the Tottenham game, the fitness levels of the players was particularly low. There was an opportunity to get back into that game when Eric Dyer scored an own goal towards the end. I know Newcastle were down to 10 men, but the team just didn't have any legs for me at all. And I've been a bit alarmed by the fitness levels of the players, especially after an hour of play. Players like St. Maximin, he's very dynamic and lively for the first hour of the game, but the last half an hour, there's not a lot there. So I think Fonseca would come in, put a bit more emphasis on ball work, on fitness work, and he is traditionally a manager who likes to play attacking football, and that's something that Newcastle fans have always traditionally enjoyed and, to be honest, have been starved of in the last 5-6 years. So I would like to see a bit more front football, a bit more organisation defensively, and a bit more fitness, and I think Fonseca is someone who might be able to bring that.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you've got to kind of get that balance between, we know the club has a budget and it's going to be a big budget, so they could realistically go out and get anyone that they wanted if they wanted to spend the money that we know is there. And you could go in and get a mid-level manager like Fonseca, like you say, but all the elements, they're not perfect, are they? Because you do have, like we say, leaky defence, but Newcastle are in the relegation zone, and they're not there through bad luck. They're there because, let's be honest, they've been very poor this season. Yes, a lot of that can place at the feet of Steve Bruce, but he's gone. Graham Jones has had a bit to work with him. Of course, Graham Jones has been there throughout Steve Bruce's the last year or so. And it won't be just a case of a new manager coming in and just instantly getting the results, because I don't know about you, but there seems to be something ingrained in these players where I think that they are better than the relegation zone, but they're only just. And you do worry about someone without Premier League experience. Can they come in and turn this around? Because they are right in the mix of this relegation battle in a survival scrap. And, you look at the fixtures coming up, I can't see where they're going to pick up too many wins. And the new manager is going to have to come in and obviously try and get the wins. And it's not going to be an easy task.
Yeah, and that's perhaps what's holding the situation up. Maybe they've interviewed Fonseca and not liked what he's had to say, and maybe they do feel, like you say, there's not enough Premier League experience in there, and there's too much of an emphasis on going forward, when really it's clear Newcastle's problems are at the back. The front line is pretty strong, but defensively, the entire back line could be changed, and that might happen in January. And is Fonseca the best person to overhaul the team defensively? So it might be a better option for a Roberto Martinez and Eddie Howe, someone who really knows the league, and has a bit more of a grasp on defensively shoring up the team, because that's exactly what Newcastle United need to do. The defence has to be their priority, and I expect to see that in this January transfer window.
We've been asked a question here by David Jackaman, and he says, do we feel the need of Harry Redknapp, Kevin Keegan type appointment to keep us up, then make an appointment for the future thereafter? Personally, them two names, no, but I think what Gary might be getting at is kind of an interim manager to come in and just survive this season, and then in the summer, you will appoint your manager who's going to lead the project. And I guess in a way that also adds another interesting element into this appointment, because you see, if they did that, who's going to come in for 6 months and then leave in the summer with this, with these owners in charge and knowing the budget. And then also the other interesting point is, if they do appoint a long-term person, a lot of people are comparing it to Man City and how Mark Hughes stayed for a bit and then he went off. Mancini came in, he stayed for a bit, went off, and then, you know, it eventually led to Guardiola. A lot of pundits are saying you don't want to be the first manager to come into this job because, you know, 2-3 years down the line, they're probably going to move it up a level and go for the next big name and then so on and so forth.
Exactly. There's stages to this, isn't there? That's why it's not going to be a Conte and it's not going to be a Rafa and Mourinho, because they come in when the foundations are a bit more stable. The suggestion there for Harry Redknapp and Keegan, the very nostalgic one, isn't it? With Keegan, he hasn't got any interest in coming back to take over the team for the third time. It would be so. For the third time as a player and manager, so I can rule that out. Harry Redknapp probably been out of it too long now as well. The guy who comes in and does that in the modern era is Sam Allardyce, and that's not really a name I want to be talking about when I'm discussing the next Newcastle United manager. Been there, done that, but he is the modern day relegation specialist. So if you're going to go down that route, it would probably be Big Sam. Personally, not for me, not at all. But who knows what the new owners are thinking? How panicked are they by the prospect of relegation? If you want to go down that route, then you're shopping in the aisle of Big Sam, Tony Pulis, Mark Hughes, these guys who've been in relegation battles before. I wouldn't like to go there. I like to think there's enough quality in the team for a good modern manager to come in, to organise them, to increase fitness, to bring in new defensive faces in January to get them safe.
But is there enough quality? Because we know a forward line there is, but you relying on Callum Wilson. I mean, Alan Shearer did a podcast yesterday with CBS, and he said, look, you know, Callum Wilson's career, he's going to get injured at some point. He's not going to play all the games. St Max, when we saw against Palace, if he's marked out the game or it doesn't quite work, Newcastle are obviously they're a lesser threat. And then defensively, you know, I think there was 5 players in that squad or that starting 11 against Palace who were part of that championship squad. So you do worry, you know, how much quality they've actually got in that squad. And I suppose it's a sign of how Mike Ashley and Newcastle United stagnated under his ownership, that, you know, we are talking about these players 5-6 years on from that championship winning side. And of course, the new manager comes in and he still has, say if he comes in next week, he's still going to have 6 weeks to 2 months or so to have to try and turn it around without being able to bring in new players. And that's the big worry, I think, for many people. And then come January, Ketch, if they're still in this relegation battle, even if they're 2 or 3 points out, you're not going to be able to convince big name players to come. And I'm not talking about Mbappe or, you know, Gareth Bale. I'm just talking about the level below them, really, or they're leaving the level below that. You know, the kind of players who can't get in the team at Manchester United. You're not going to convince them to come. And also, I think it takes a different type of player to get you out of that relegation scrap to achieve survival. And again, it goes to, well, how are you going to sell that to somebody? Come in for 6 months, achieve survival, be here till next January, and then we'll move you on. I know money speaks, but, you know, I like to think some players have got a bit of integrity about them, and they don't just want to come for, you know, half a project, so to speak.
And that's where I think you probably need as good a manager as you can in position to sell it to the player. You know, do you want Sam Allardyce trying to tempt a player in January to come and join the relegation battle, or do you want Paulo Fonseca, Roberto Martinez, Steven Gerrard? I think that's a brighter prospect for a player in January. So I think you do need to get the best manager possible in position for the January transfer window, because survival is absolutely crucial. The regression of the club defensively is quite alarming. I didn't think they were particularly bad defensively last season, but something's happened. They're very poor compared to last season. There was players I thought had decent seasons last season, Fernandes, Kieran Clark, who've been very poor this season, very below standard, and I wonder, you know, is that them reaching a stage of their career where their game is regressing, or is that a coaching thing? You know, do they just need some new ideas, some new inspiration, and a new manager would bring that, regardless of who it is, fresh ideas, freshen it up, and everyone's game raises. You get the new manager bounce. We didn't quite see that with Graham Jones on Saturday. It was quite a poor game from a Newcastle perspective, but I just think you go for the best possible option, and I do think that person, the momentum can get them safe. I see worse clubs in the league, and I think Newcastle are underperforming massively, and there's a bigger ceiling to reach in terms of performance levels, especially at the back. It can't get much worse.
But do you believe someone like Fonseca, who comes into this job without any Premier League experience, which is one thing, and without obviously then a survival experience, can take the job on and be successful in it? Because it could be daunting to some managers, and then you have just how important this job is to the city, to Newcastle fans. You know, it's not just any job, and I'm not talking about expectation because that word gets unfairly thrown at Newcastle United. I'm just talking about how important it is, how it sets up the week. If Newcastle win, if they lose, people tend to go to work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in a foul mood. You know, it's a unique job, and it takes someone with broad shoulders to handle that. And then plus you've got the fact that they'll probably be in a survival scrap all the way leading into maybe January, February.
Yeah, and the new owners don't know that. It's a jump into the unknown for them. It's a jump into the unknown for someone like Fonseca who doesn't know the league and who doesn't really know how he'll adapt. So it's on the onus will have been on him to sell himself in these interviews, in these discussions. You know, what are his ideas? That will have been a high on the agenda in the discussions. You know, do you think you can steer the team out of relegation? How do you think you will do it? Obviously, we're not privy to those discussions, but I like to think he has a clear, concise plan and has looked at the squad, looked at the players, looked at potential targets, and rolled them out in his discussions and said, this is how I would do it. And now the ball seems to be in the new owners' court, and they need to make a decision. Have they seen enough in their discussions with Fonseca to give him, to give him the keys and put him in the driving seat? That's a huge question. It's like I said, the biggest decision in the club's modern history. We can't have Fonseca come in and not get a result for half a dozen games. There is not enough time to do that. He needs to come in and instantly start putting points on the board. The club are 3 points adrift already. We're in October, so whoever comes in needs to get in and get some results. There's some more winnable games coming up. We've had a few winnable games, haven't got anything from them. There's some more winnable games coming up in November. They're absolutely massive because we can't get sucked into this relegation battle, because then we've seen it before. Panic sets in, you lose momentum, and no matter how many new players you bring in, it's often difficult to survive.
And of course, the new manager, whoever it will be, will have to also deal with the scrutiny and attention that comes with being the richest club in the Premier League or one of the richest clubs in the world. And of course, all the attention that comes with the new owners, all the national attention that comes on the human rights side of things. And, I suppose the good thing with that, Ketch, we've seen more communication over the last few weeks from the new owners than we ever did under Mike Ashley and in his tenure. So the manager, we would think, wouldn't have to face all that by himself, and he'd probably just be okay to talk about football and matters. We would think, which is a good thing, because Steve Bruce did have to deal with everything, all the things that weren't even his fault. He had to deal with it because no one would come up and speak out and help him out. So I suppose that's one good element of this new ownership, but it is going to be something that the new manager is going to have to deal with. The banner being unveiled at the Crystal Palace, and that's not going to stop. And that's something that whoever the new guy is going to have to try and deal with.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, obviously, takeover questions are now off the table, and instead the manager might be asked about things like protests and human rights, and they'll be briefed on that, and that's just another bit of noise that comes with the territory. Really, if you're going to be a Premier League manager, you're asked about politics and world affairs and big decisions that are taking place in amongst world football, and this is a huge talking point. Newcastle are now under the microscope big time, and one thing that kind of worries me a little bit is we seem to be creeping into the territory of being everyone's hated club now. A little taste of that against Palace on Saturday, and I wonder if that's gonna spur on the opposition fans and spur on opposition players to get results against us. The jealousy is clearly there from the other clubs, the other owners ganging up, meeting to try and put hurdles in the way of Newcastle's new ownership. There'll be a bit of a siege mentality, and I worry if that's going to translate onto the pitch and it's going to up the game of the players and up the atmospheres inside stadiums, and that might be another thing for Newcastle to contend with this season.
Yeah, and something fans are going to have to deal with as well. It's going to be interesting because it's something that we've never had before as fans, to deal with that pressure and scrutiny. Of course, the other 19 Premier League clubs don't seem to happen. You imagine there'll be some more manoeuvring from those to try and halt Newcastle's spending power. A lot of people in the comments asking about the new under-23 coach.
Sorry, mate, have you just muted yourself there?
2 seconds. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back off mute.
Grand. I think the mic. This is not the best mic in the world. I was just talking about Elliot Dickman and how Lee Wright, our colleague's got a story going up on our website in the next few moments, saying that yep, it does look like the Sunderland coach is going to come and manage the 23s, and that the wheels were in motion for that to happen before the takeover. So another man in charge of the 23s, but hopefully some someone who's going to be around long term, because there are a few good names in that under 23 pool who've been impressing. Elliot Anderson, Joe White. So hopefully some of them can step up to the first team. But yeah, lots of interesting comments. I mean, we've got one here about Roy Hodgson as well, who was tipped last week by I think it was Danny Mills, was it, on Talksport. It didn't go down too well, but you can see why some people are suggesting that is the route to take, because Newcastle are in such trouble at the moment.
Yeah, I think it was Gary's shout earlier about Kevin Keegan and Harry Redknapp. Their time, I think, is over in the Premier League. But someone like Roy Hodgson, Sam Allardyce, those are the names you would consider if you were going to maybe look at a temporary option to shore the ship up, secure survival, negotiate a big January transfer window, and get the club through the summer safely, and then make a more long-term appointment, almost like a kind of mid to long-term caretaker role. It's quite unusual. I'm not sure if I would be into that idea. I think I'd probably prefer to get a permanent manager in and throw support and resources behind them. But the owners of getting deep into the club and having a look at the lay of the land, and it maybe they think that's the better option. They might not trust Fonseca, as an example, to come in straight away, and they might feel safer with someone like Roy Hodgson, who I'll be honest, surprised me last season. I thought he was great last season. I thought Roy's best years were behind him. Maybe they were, but I thought he did fantastically with Palace, and did maybe what Steve Bruce should have done, and left the club in a safe position, and said that's me done. I'm gonna go into semi-retirement. So Roy Hodgson's an interesting shout. I don't mind that idea, but I'd probably prefer to go down the route of a permanent appointment.
We mentioned the Palace game, and I mean, some of the stats were rather worrying. 75% possession for Palace. They had 15 shots. You mentioned how Benteke could have scored a bag full of goals. And what we saw again was just the over-reliance on Callum Wilson, who, when fit, absolutely brilliant. But, at 6-6 now, great overhead kick. Not just any overhead kick. I mean, that was a proper overhead kick. But you do worry that when a defence manages to mark him out of the game, or if he does end up getting injured, just where the goal's going to come from.
Yeah, really worrying. And we're getting Wilson's goals now, but we're not getting the points. You look at Wilson's stats, and he's going to play 20 odd games if you're lucky, and get maybe a dozen goals, and if he's already got 4 or 5 of them, and we haven't got the points, it's a little bit worrying. So yeah, we know that I really like the look of the team going forward. There's some exciting players up there, we know, but defensively is where it's a big worry. I think Dubravka coming back is going to be huge. I just feel much safer when he's at the back, and the back line just feels a bit more organised. I saw a lot of panic at the Tottenham game. I saw a lot of panicking among the defenders, shouting, looking at each other, head spinning, no shape at all. I just wonder if Dubravka helps that situation a bit more. He seems to be a more vocal goalkeeper than Darlow, who I do like, but I would hope Dubravka can come back into the team sooner rather than later. But there's no real noise coming out of the club that he's nearing match fitness, which is a bit worrying.
I mean, that's an interesting take. I mean, I don't know how much that would read. I mean, Carl Darlow, I think Dubravka is a better goalkeeper than Carl Darlow, but I think just generally the players at the back line, they just look a little bit out of place. I mean, Matt Ritchie came back last season, did really well, but defensively he's just been caught out time and time again this season. He just, every time they go forward, there's just so much space. The space between the midfield and the defense against Spurs was border on criminal, really. I mean, it was a joke, and I just think as much as Bradford coming back and being that vocal goalkeeper, there's the new manager has to come in and just really grab things by the scruff of the neck and just try and get some organisation in, and maybe bring Jamal Lewis back in and give him a go. Maybe a bit more defensively sound than Matt Ritchie. Just needs a bit of an arm around him, a bit of confidence, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see Graham Jones starting Emil Kraft and Ryan Fraser. That just shows he's got a different read on the team than someone like Steve Bruce. And again, if a new manager comes in, it's going to be fascinating to see that first lineup. Who does he like the look of in training, and who does he think fits the system best? Because it has been square pegs and round holes for too long now, and I think the five at the back with the two attacking wing backs is just unbalancing us greatly. So hopefully, we'll have a full strength squad soon. And I think it's within the interest of the club to make some sort of an appointment or communication as to what the plan is in the immediate aftermath of the Chelsea game.
And we'll, of course, keep you up to date with all the latest news on that Newcastle United managerial appointment when it does indeed happen. If you head over to chroniclelive.co.uk, that's where you'll find everything to do with Newcastle United. Please remember to like and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast provider. Thank you very much for tuning in.